All right, let's talk about something you've definitely seen. And you know what? You've probably even done it yourself. I'm talking about slacktivism. You know, those super easy online clicks for a cause. The big question is, are they actually changing the world or are they just making us feel good? Let's dig in and find out.
I mean, really think about it for a second. Have you ever slapped a filter on your profile pic to show you're in solidarity with something? Or signed one of those super quick online petitions? Maybe shared an infographic about a crisis happening somewhere? It's kind of the native language of social media, right? But the real question is, what does any of that actually do? Well, there's a name for this stuff: slacktivism. It's pretty much what it sounds like, a mix of slacker and activism. And honestly, it's the perfect word for these kinds of low-effort but very visible online actions. It's basically activism you can do without ever leaving your couch. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. We see it all the time, right? Changing your profile picture to a flag or a ribbon, jumping on a trending hashtag, hitting like or retweeting a post, or signing that petition that just pops right up in your feed. In a lot of ways, these have become the building blocks for online movements. And that brings us right to the heart of the debate. This is the big one, the question that splits everybody, from experts and activists to just regular people scrolling through their feeds. Is any of this stuff helpful at all? Or is it just useless, a gesture that doesn't really accomplish anything?
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, let's set it up like a debate. In one corner, we've got Team It's Fake Activism. They're the ones who say it's all just for show. And in the other corner, we've got Team It Can Still Help. And they believe that, yeah, these small actions can actually make a difference.
All right, let's kick things off with the critics. We're going to dive into the case against slacktivism, the argument that says it's basically just an illusion of progress.
So, first up for Team Fake, we've got the thinker, Evgeny Morozov. And his big warning is about something he calls the feel-good illusion.
So here's his argument. When you click share or like, your brain gets this tiny little hit of satisfaction, right? It feels good. It feels like you've actually contributed, like you've done something real. But Morozov says, hold on, that's a trick. Because it involves absolutely no personal risk, it often leads to, well, no real-world change. You get the feeling of being an activist, but without any of the actual substance. And maybe the most famous quote in this whole debate comes from the author, Malcolm Gladwell. It's short, punchy, and it pretty much sums up his entire argument. See, Gladwell draws this really stark line between the high-stakes activism of the past, think about the civil rights movement, and the online campaigns we see today. He says real-world changing movements were built on strong friendships, on people willing to face real danger, like going to jail or worse. But online activism, he says that's built on what he calls weak ties. You know, thousands of followers you've never met. There's almost zero personal risk involved.
Okay, the last big point from Team Fake comes from researcher Ann Eikenberry, and she takes aim at a very specific type of slacktivism, this idea that we can literally shop our way to a better world.
You know the drill. It's simple, and it feels great. A company sells you a product, maybe it's a pair of shoes, a t-shirt, whatever, and they promise a little piece of that sale goes to a good cause. So we buy it, we feel like we've helped, but Eikenberry warns that this whole thing creates some pretty big problems.
First off, a shockingly tiny amount of that money usually gets to where it's supposed to go. Second, it pushes this really simplistic and honestly kind of dangerous idea that huge, complex issues like poverty can just be solved by buying stuff. And maybe the most critical point, it totally lets governments and big institutions off the hook. It makes it seem like systemic change is our job as shoppers, not theirs.
Wow, okay, that is a pretty powerful case against slacktivism. But that's only half the story. So now, let's flip the script and hear from Team It Can Help. They argue that writing off all online action is actually a huge mistake.
Henrik Christensen comes in with a really crucial point. He basically says, look, criticizing people for not marching in the streets and engaging in high-risk activism, that completely ignores the reality for millions and millions of people around the globe. Think about it. For so many people, especially if you live under an authoritarian government, protesting in public could literally mean getting thrown in prison or worse. In that kind of situation, sharing a post isn't being lazy. It can be a real, calculated risk. It's a way to get crucial information out there. It might even be the first step that gets someone more deeply involved. And you know, it's definitely better than doing nothing at all.
And if you want to see just how powerful a hashtag can be, well, let's talk about a real-world example. #WhyIStayed. This is a perfect and really moving example of how online action can create very real change.
So this hashtag gave survivors of domestic violence a space to finally answer that awful victim-blaming question, why didn't you just leave? And sharing those stories that are so personal and so painful, that took an incredible amount of courage. This was the total opposite of zero effort. This involved a massive emotional risk.
Writer Meredith Clark summed it up perfectly. She said that just by creating that space to talk openly, the hashtag completely changed the public conversation about domestic violence. It educated millions of people, it empowered survivors, and it proved that sometimes just talking and sharing and connecting, well, that is a powerful form of activism.
Okay, so we've heard from both sides now. Team Fake says it's just a feel-good illusion that doesn't do much. Team It Helps says it can be a really important tool for raising awareness and kicking off change. So, where does that leave us? What's the final verdict?
Well, the truth, like it usually is kinda complicated. It's somewhere in the middle. The real verdict is, it depends, 100%. On one side, yes, a click can just be a useless, feel-good button that lets us off the hook from doing real work. But on the other side, that exact same click can be the thing that raises crucial awareness, gives a voice to people who feel totally alone, and maybe, just maybe, becomes the tiny spark that ignites a real movement. And I think that's really the bottom line here. Look, is a single retweet or changing your profile picture gonna topple a dictator? No. Is it gonna end world poverty? Of course not. But to just write these things off as totally pointless means you're ignoring their power to connect people, to educate them, and to start conversations that desperately need to happen.
So the next time you're scrolling and you see a cause and your thumb is just hovering over that share button, maybe the real question isn't just, should I click this, but what happens next? Is this click the end of your involvement, or is it just the beginning? What is that click really going to mean?